Welcome back to Flashpoint. Let's jump right in with our virtual panel this morning. Joining me this morning is Chastity Pratt, who's the Education Bureau Chief for the Wall Street Journal and formerly of Bridge Magazine and the Detroit Free Press. Ingrid Jacques is the Deputy Editorial Page Editor for the Detroit News. And let us not forget, a journalism grad from Michigan State, after my own heart. Lori Higgins is the Bureau Chief for Chalk Beat Detroit and was an education reporter for almost 2 decades for the Detroit Free Press. Everyone, welcome this morning. We appreciate you being here. I want to start with, I just talked to the AG Dana Nessel about her lawsuit against Education Secretary Betsy DeVos. Chastity, let me ask you first. I'm going to ask everyone, how important is this lawsuit?
Well, actually you should start with Lori because they're all over it. And right now, I think that nationally, there are a lot of districts, a lot of places that are going to take a look at it and watch it and see what happens. But I mean, you're giving money to private schools. You have public schools that are going to be facing cuts. This is definitely something that a lot of states are going to be looking at to see where it goes.
Yeah. Lori, what was your, I know you have been covering this extensively. When you saw this and as you cover it, what jumps out to you with this lawsuit?
I think, one, it will certainly set a precedent in that, right now, private schools can receive services through Title I funds that school districts receive. And what the secretary was trying to do is to provide even more funding for private schools. And the courts will have to decide whether or not they've been pretty lenient in letting federal departments determine how to interpret federal law. So it'll be interesting to see if the courts will weigh in on this. There are a lot of education law scholars who believe that the department is overstepping. But there are people that say that this lawsuit may not be successful.
Ingrid, do you think it's overstepping, or should all students be able to access this money?
Well, I think that there's a case to be made that these, at least some private school students are deserving of this funding. And the way I read Secretary DeVos's rule on this is that states that decide to allocate the money based on Title I funding, which Michigan has, then that funding would still need to go to also low-income students in private schools, is my understanding. So it's not, to hear the Attorney General talk about this, it's as if Secretary DeVos wants to send money to rich kids who don't need it. And I don't really think that's the case. And I mean, it makes for good sound bites for Nessel to go up against Betsy DeVos, huge target for Democrats. But I think as long as the money is allocated to students in both public and private schools that need it the most, I think there's a case. And I did the math, and it looks like out of the $390 million that Michigan received through the CARES Act funding, if the new rule does stay in place, then it's about 21 million that would be divided among private school students. That's about 4% of the total funding, so still pretty small.
When we talk, go ahead, Lori.
I just want to clarify one thing. I just want to make it clear that she's not just saying this money should go to low-income or needy students in private schools. She's saying that because that's what would have happened anyway, based on the formula that is used to distribute Title I money. She's essentially saying that it should go to all students who attend private schools, because the public schools are going to be using that CARES funding to benefit all of their students, not just their low-income students. So I just want to make that clear.
Ingrid, did you want to jump in there? It looked like you wanted to say something.
Well, I think Lori's maybe delved into the details more, but I just think the state has leeway to do this fairly for all students. And I think since Governor Whitmer's orders related to school safety and reopening this fall apply to all students, including students in private schools, that It does seem fair that there should be some funding allocated to those students, at least the students in need.
Yeah, it's a nice segue for.
And that's the.
Go ahead, Chastity.
No, I was just going to say that, that's quite obviously the issue. It's an issue of fairness. It's public funds. Should public funds go to only private schools, or should private schools be allowed to access those funds? That has been an ages-old question, and the situation that all schools find themselves in right now is just another reason to continue to have this conversation, and another reason why this conversation is not going to go away anytime soon.
Yeah, and we really, the overall question that is on everyone's mind is, what is school going to look like? We're hearing from the federal level and the president just this strong push for full in-person learning. And then the governor responded to that with a tweet and has said some comments saying, I want to make it clear, I will not send our kids and our education workforce into our schools unless it is safe to do so. Plain and simple. I've made decisions based on science and facts to keep Michiganders safe since the beginning, and I won't stop now. I want to ask everybody this at this point. What has to happen in your eyes for students to return for in-person learning in the fall? Chastity, I'll start with you again.
Well, across the country, and Michigan is no exception, parents and school officials are dealing with, what happens when we don't have school. We know what happened over the past 3 months. We know what happened. There's a lot of students who lost, learning opportunities, learning loss. And those who are most disadvantaged are most impacted. So there's a huge push, obviously, to get schools open. What needs to happen is there's got to be an agreement as to the benefit outweighing the cost. What happens when you have reopening plans where it's staggered and some siblings are at home by themselves? That's a big deal. That's a big question. And so you have to figure out the scheduling. You have to figure out the social distancing. You have to figure out how to pay for it all. You have to figure out which teachers are going to be able to be there and which have to stay home. So there's a confluence of issues here. And obviously, no one has the one good plan. There are all kinds of plans all over the place. And it has to be figured out in, less than a month?
Right. So about 6-7 weeks. Ingrid, what do you think the biggest things that need to be hashed out before we can even start sending kids back?
I would not want to be a school administrator right now. I mean, the challenges are so intense right now, and there's still so many uncertainties as to what will a classroom look like. The governor has laid out some parameters, but it's going to depend on where certain parts of the state are as far as reopening phases, and those could change between now and the fall as we're seeing some cases tick upward again. And schools have been saying they need at least $1 billion just to help fund some of these additional expenses. But yet the budget is not set yet for the upcoming fiscal year, and there could be cuts coming instead of additional aid. So there's uncertainties there, and who knows what parents are even going to feel comfortable doing. We've had a survey out that shows a really significant percentage of parents are saying they don't think they're comfortable sending their children to school. But then, of course, you have other parents who think that as long as the risk is not too high, they think it would be better for their child to be back in that social setting with their teacher, especially for young children. I don't think the online model was an easy transition at all. So, there's just all these factors in place that are going to have to be ironed out. And there's not much time between now and the beginning of the school year.
Right. And Lori, we've seen, I think parents might even have to choose. They didn't have to before because they had to stay home, but some parents might now have to choose between their job and teaching their kids if they have to stay home.
Exactly. And I think that's an issue that's going to weigh on a lot of districts. They have to assure parents who want to bring their kids to school that it's going to be safe to do so, but they also have to address the needs of parents who don't have childcare. We know that childcare is already an issue in Michigan, particularly in the city where there are deserts, where there are no quality childcare providers. So what are parents supposed to do if they can't get their kids to school and they can't get to work? There's there may not be a child care center for them. There may be a lot of child care centers that never reopen after they close in the spring. And so much of the discussion right now has been on reopening and getting to that point, but not a whole lot of discussion on what happens after we reopen. There are so many questions that if I'm a parent, I'm wanting to know the answers to, such as what happens if there are cases that pop up once we go back to school? What are the protocols? There are no requirements in the state guidelines as to what schools should do. There are recommendations, but they leave a lot up to schools. And so I think that there's a lot that if I'm a parent right now, I'm not really sure exactly what to do.
Yeah, and I don't usually quote Mike Tyson. Go ahead. Who's jumping?
No, to some of the just Chastity, to a few of those points that Lori made about childcare. Even if there was childcare because your kid has some days in school and some days out of school, who can afford that? There are a lot of families that can't afford to take on childcare costs. And also, if there are cases, how would we know? How would we know? Because children are so asymptomatic. How would we know if there are children who are coming to school and they're, super spreaders? Do we wait until the teachers get sick again?
Right.
And more importantly, a good question I think that parents are, mulling over in their minds is, what if there is an outbreak and schools have to close again? What did our school systems learn about closing from the last time to do it in a way that's safer? And then, really, let's keep it really real. The Journal, we did a story about remote learning that said, hey, guess what? It didn't really work. What have we learned about making online learning better?
Yeah, we have to leave it there. I appreciate everyone's thoughts on this. A lot of unanswered questions. We appreciate everybody's time this morning. We'll be back to wrap up in just a moment.